Okay, so this is kind of the short version I had of kind of an explanation of the drama triangle and how to deal with that. Just kind of as a background, the place that this came from me and why the drama triangle became so important is because, as I was saying a little bit ago, I was an absolute disaster. If you go back in time a few years, it was about 5 years ago, it was around 2015. I was just a train wreck. I had, at that point, I had just become an attorney, and everything felt stressful all the time. Everything felt like drama all the time. You know, every interaction I was having with clients, the people I was interacting with on the other side of the fence, it was always like fights or people were angry. At home, had this kind of mess. I ended up going through a divorce. I had this pretty terrible relationship with my kids. I remember like yelling at them or hiding from them. I felt like I was victimized by them all the time just because they were just being kids, but it was just kind of frustrating. I had situations where I felt like I was killing myself in cases and people weren't like paying me. I wasn't managing my law firm well at that point. I have one particular memory. I had this case where I took on this case from another attorney who couldn't work the case, and there was like a trial next week. And so I took it over, which is kind of last second in that universe. And as I jumped into it, I felt like I worked myself to death. I didn't take any payment up front because I was like, okay, let's just get the trial done and then I'll worry about it later. I stayed up like all night the day before the trial, prepping for it. I went in, I thought I did a pretty good job. And then the client was like all up in arms about these weird things. We got a pretty good outcome on a lot of the issues. And then she never paid me a penny. And so I was like, so then I felt like I was victimized by this person. And it was just like everything felt stressful. Everything felt like drama. It was just a mess. I ended up getting kind of suicidal at one point. And there came this point where there was like a turning point where I was like, okay, this doesn't work anymore. And I started doing all sorts of psychology research and self-help stuff. And there's a lot of different things I think that pulled me out. Obviously today I feel great, as you guys know from my normal ramblings, but one of the big things that had a huge impact, especially in the law firm context for me, was this whole drama triangle thing. I know we were talking before this about, some of the different exposures we've had to them. We've seen them in, Servan, you were just saying, you've seen them in the other presentation that we talked about. You see it all over the place. The basic model's fairly straightforward, although I think there's a lot of confusion around it. It gets called different things. Got them kind of in the bubble here. The drama triangle is one of the common ones. The dreaded drama triangle is another name for it. Sometimes I just hear it in DDT. The Karpman Drama Triangle is sometimes referred to as, and that's just after the guy that invented it. He was named Dr. Stephen Karpman. He put together the model in the 60s, I believe it was. Sometimes I've heard it called the victim triangle. Kane Ramsey I'm pretty sure he said victim triangle. Regardless of what it is, it's the same basic concept. And it is this thing you see over on the left here, which is it's a triangle that encompasses human interactions, particularly as they relate to conflict. There are 3 points on the triangle. There's the persecutor in the upper left, and the orientations in this is actually important. Persecutor is always in the upper left, rescuer is on the upper right, and then the victim is on the bottom. Okay, so the orientation here is interesting because everything starts with the victim. The situation begins when somebody feels like they're a victim of something. Some persecutor is wronging them. They're doing something that is causing them injury. And the reason you always have the whole triangle pointed downwards where the victim is on the bottom comes from Dr. Karpman. He says it's kind of like where you have like the rescuer and the persecutor are actually puppet masters, and they're just kind of like playing the strings of this victim. And the victim is just kind of dancing in response to what the persecutor and the rescuer are doing, which is just sort of stuff that's happening around them. So each of the orientations, I think they're really important to understand. I mean, again, it starts with the victim on the bottom of the triangle. The victim generally comes in with this perception of helplessness. They're coming in just saying, okay, somebody or something is hurting me. The orientation, notice I'm saying orientation as opposed to saying somebody is a victim. The orientation is all about your mindset when you're dealing with your problems. So when you take on this victim orientation, you just start to say, oh my gosh, this is so awful. I can't do this. Like, why are these people doing this to me? Why is this person hurting me? Why am I in this situation? This is my luck. This always happens to me. It's very reactive. It's very like things are happening to me. Most of the time, you won't take action when you're in this victim orientation until you get pushed far enough that you feel like you have to, or there's like no other choice. The really simple example is like if you think of your homework, you got some big project due for school and it's due 3 weeks from now, and you're like, oh, I'll do it later, and like there's no motivation to actually get going on it, and then the night before you're like, oh my god, my life has been so busy, and then all of a sudden you get kicked into gear, like that anxiety that's coming up, if I don't complete this, my grades are going to suffer. Like that's what motivates people into action. The same thing is true of the victim. Like they don't usually do anything unless they're forced into it. And when at all other times they're just kind of complaining about things. And again, we talked about kind of the victim being on the bottom of the triangle there. The persecutor is another really critical role in this. The persecutor is all about kind of criticisms, attacks, doing something that you're lashing out at another person. A lot of times it can be as simple as just like yelling at somebody or calling somebody a name, something like that. Very often, particularly you see this in like domestic violence situations where somebody becomes hyper controlling, they're sort of always critical. Like if you have like an abused housewife or something, the abuser becomes the persecutor and he starts lashing out, saying things like, well, I'm trying to do this to help you. I'm trying to do this because, I want you to be a better person, or you forced me into this, or, it's always these sort of attacks. And that's kind of the nature of the persecutor. The interesting thing is that the persecutor is coming from a place of anger, typically. And whether that anger is justified or not, the anger results in a lashing out at the victim. The victim is the one that has caused me to this anger most of the time. And so they feel like they're going to lash out for whatever reason. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't quite catch on to is you don't actually have to have the persecutor as a person. It can be a situation, it can be God, it can be the hurricane that just tore through my house has like hurt me. This is what I have on here is a snapshot I took, or a screenshot of a thing I saw on a forum on Facebook. And I thought it captured this concept really well. The original poster said, does anyone ever feel that, and there's a typo there, but anyone ever feel that God is not kind to you? And so somebody comes in and says, absolutely, if there is a God, he certainly seems to play favorites. Some are born into much better circumstances than others. Some are just born smarter, luckier, better looking, to better families with more opportunities, etc., than others. It's not fair. And if it's all intentional, then shame on him for bringing innocence into the world to suffer. And then somebody else comes in and says, true. And so in my mind, this really embodies this concept of like all three of these people have come in and said, I want to complain. I don't like the way things are. It's God's fault. So God has become the persecutor. It's not a human being, of course. So it can be anything. And it's about this mindset of, I don't like what's going on, whatever the situation is, I don't like it. And therefore I'm going to complain about it and point to someone or something that's to blame for it. The third role in this whole thing is the rescuer orientation. The rescuer is kind of wants to be the white knight. They want to come in and help. They see it as helping. When you're a rescuer, you feel like you're doing good. You're coming in to try to protect someone from some terrible situation. One of the examples I always think of is when you have like a domestic violence situation, and I hear people say this all the time, like, oh, I just found out you were abusing that guy was abusing his wife. Like if I had just 5 minutes alone in a room with that guy, I'd tell him what's what. Now, I think that's a reflection of the same kind of motive. Like I need to go in and fix the problem myself. The problem is everything's dependent on this person. You're confusing this idea of I'm going to save somebody I'm going to figure out how to empower them. And you just want to be the one to fix it. You want to be the hero. You want to be the one that everybody's looking at as like, yay, you saved us. This was when I first became an attorney. This was one of my problems, I think, is I was always looking at everything like I wanted to be the white knight. I wanted that example I gave you. I wanted to come in and win that case for this poor oppressed woman, and then I got caught up in the same game. They're driven by this purpose very often. You see this in political fronts very frequently. People trying to come in and protect whatever version of their downtrodden they're looking at. But that's the key to being the rescuer. And I've kind of alluded to this already. This is a quote from Dr. Stephen Karpman's book, A Game-Free Life, which is really interesting. He talks a lot of depth about the drama triangle, but he says, I want to emphasize that persecutor, rescuer, and victim are not people. They are merely roles people play, more or less consciously, when they're in psychological games. Part of the reason I think this is so interesting is I've seen a lot of presentations on the drama triangle, and I think people get confused on this topic. They think, okay, that person over there is a victim. That person over there is just a persecutor. I've gone to like continuing legal education classes where they've said this kind of thing before, where they say, okay, well, that type of client, they're just a persecutor. All they do is lash out at you. But I think that doesn't really help you in terms of utilizing this. I think it's much more helpful and constructive to look at this as mindset. Like each of these roles in the drama triangle are just like cognitive tools. They're things that we default into. We don't really think about it, but it's just a way of looking at the problems that you're dealing with. And it's not just who you are, which is nice because that means you can change it, right? You're not just locked into this as long as you can become conscious of what's going on. Another really interesting thing I think about the drama triangle that is often not referenced very well is the fact that when you're in this drama triangle game, you shift from position to position very frequently, like because you're wrapped up in the game. You are not just always a victim. You're not just always a persecutor. You are not just always in rescuer mode. You will rapidly rotate sometimes. You can have places that you tend to drift into more often than others, but you're not locked into any one spot. This is another thing I pulled off of Facebook. It's a meme that I thought really reflected this transition of what I'm talking about. So in the meme, it says, when you have a good heart, you help too much, you trust too much, you give too much, you love too much. So at this point, I'm already thinking rescuer, right? This person's giving, I want to help, I want to like give. And it always seems like you're the one who gets hurt the most. So then they've swung themselves from, I'm going out, I'm trying to help all these people, and then they're turning on me, which means they've now shifted into victim mode. Like I'm the one that's injured. Those people I was trying to rescue, who previously in their minds subconsciously were victims, have kind of become the persecutors. So everything's like moving around. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is another example which I thought was entertaining. This was a screenshot I took. This was this guy that apparently was selling a bed, sofa bed or something, and somebody messages him and says, "Is it still available?" It's 8:17 p.m. and then he says, "Hello." 2 minutes later, then right after that, a minute later, "I'm late to pick up my daughter and I need to know now." So 4 minutes after that, I mean, keep in mind, we're now, 7 minutes into this exchange where this guy's posted this thing on. He says, "Jesus, man, I'm sorry. It's been like 5 minutes. Yes, it's available." And then the response from this guy is, "I was late picking up my daughter because of you." Numerous exclamation points. "I demand a reduction in the price or I'm not taking it." And then the guy ends with, "Well, I guess you won't take it then. Tell your daughter I'm sorry, you're her dad." I thought this was a really, I know it's kind of, I found it amusing, but I think this is a good reflection of somebody going from victim into persecutor mode. Because remember, persecutor is driven by anger, right? I need to lash out at somebody. So initially he's sitting here saying, I need this response. And if I don't get this response right now, I'm being injured. You know, whether it's reasonable or not, obviously it's not in this situation. And then when he feels like he's injured, then he goes on the offensive, taking that anger and becoming the persecutor. Now this other guy's like, what the heck? You know, I'm the victim. And then it can continue on from there. The reason it's called the drama game, it actually comes from a book called The Games People Play by Eric Berne, which was all about transactional analysis. And Eric Berne was kind of the mentor teacher of Stephen Karpman, the guy that created the drama triangle. And we don't have to get too far into that because it's kind of complex, but the key thing for this is that in transactional analysis, the idea is that everybody's just kind of unconsciously walking around playing these games. We're always like looking for other people to interact with, and it's like this ongoing social game in essence. An example of that you could have is, like, say for example, there's this super hot girl and she goes on Facebook and she posts this picture of herself in a bikini and says, "Oh my God, I'm so fat." In a vacuum, that doesn't really make sense, right? The girl doesn't post a picture of herself like scantily clad because she's thinking she's actually fat. She's prompting a game. And the game becomes a transaction because she wants to get something from somebody else. And namely, she wants somebody to say, no, you're not, you're so hot, oh my God, you're beautiful, or whatever it is. The person that's saying that, that's coming on, could be a guy and he's hoping to, engage with her in some fashion, or it might be some girlfriend that's trying to stroke her ego and therefore reinforce their friendship or whatever it is. But these interactions, people are each getting something out of it, so it becomes a transaction in essence. It's usually unconscious. People are just playing this without realizing it. And the drama triangle is a specific kind of game within that kind of overarching model. And it's specifically dealing with conflict situations, like things are not going the way we want them to. And so this drama triangle behavior pattern pops up. You start shifting into victim. I don't like what's happening to me. I don't like this situation. You start swinging into rescuer. Oh, I don't like this situation that's happening to that person or people over there, so I'm going to come in and save them. Or you become a persecutor. You're angry because of whatever the situation is. But all of these pop up when you're unconsciously going through this game and you don't like what's happening. The obvious question in my mind is like, so what? Who cares if everybody's running through the drama, right? The problem, as the name implies, is that it creates drama, and drama usually escalates. I've seen a lot of that in my work as a family law attorney, and typically once you get wrapped into this game, it just kind of keeps escalating. If I lash out as a persecutor, that other person feels victimized, they want to lash back again, and then I feel like I'm victimized again, and things just kind of fireball out of control very quickly. Another major problem is the disempowerment focus of this whole thing. When you are a victim, you feel like you can't do anything. Like everything is out of your control because that person over there, the situation, whatever it is hurting you. You'd reference King Ramsey. I know he's really big on the empowerment thing, which I would second. The empowerment is a huge thing. Even the rescuer is coming in from this disempowerment perspective. They're coming in trying to solve the problem for someone. They're not saying, okay, how can I help you get out of this situation? How do I help you become stronger? How do I help you to solve the issues and put you in a place where you can solve these similar problems in the future? And it can also create dependency too, because if everybody, like if dad comes in and is always bailing you out of some problem or some situation like that, then you're always going to want to run to dad and you can't figure out how to deal with these issues on your own. So, circling back to that story I was talking about before, I was completely locked into that. I felt like my kids, when they were, barking at me, I felt like that was a problem. Felt like when my wife was doing something, I was the victim of that. I felt like clients were angry at me or the other side was angry at me. I was the victim. The situation with me as an attorney, I was totally jumping into being a rescuer. I just wanted to be a hero. I'm pretty sure subconsciously that's why I became a trial attorney in the first place. I just wanted to be everybody's white knight. And then I guarantee you there were times when I was lashing out at people as an attorney. I was like, oh, you screwed up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure they saw me as a persecutor. I was that evil attorney on the other side. I know there's people out there that hate me because of the stuff I've done as an attorney. So I was just constantly moving through the same game, just like so many other people. There are a number of different models you can use to kind of reverse this. So obviously the first step in dealing with this drama is recognizing it, seeing the pattern, understanding kind of what's going on in the first place. Most people are completely oblivious to it. There are a number of different models. Dr. Karpman has a model called the Compassion Triangle. I really like that one. There's another book called The Power of TED, which is the one I've enumerated here, which I also really like. It's a really easy read. I'd recommend it if you guys haven't heard of it or seen it. The Power of TED stands for the Empowerment Dynamic, and I'll kind of touch on that a little bit here. There's some other stuff. There's one called the Winner's Triangle, which is not my favorite, but it's another model. There's a number of different ways people have utilized this. But I think you do have to take some additional step here. You can't just stop with okay, I understand it's there, because then nothing else really changes. The empowerment dynamic sort of flows through all these things here. It's all about the mindset. It's kind of like, what are you focusing on? Here, you notice that the diagram has completely flipped. That's one of the cool things about the empowerment dynamic, is we're saying, okay, we're trying to take this traditional drama model and just turn it on its head. Instead of the victim being played like a puppet on the bottom of the triangle, in this place, you're saying, okay, instead of a victim, I'm going to become a creator. You want to become the person that creates resolution, that creates the things that you want in life. So instead of just dwelling on how you're held back, you say, okay, what do I want? How do I get there? then you shift into this creator mode. And so you're at the top of the triangle. You're now controlling everything around you. Other roles on there, the persecutor shifts into challenger. I'll elaborate on these in just a second. And then the rescuer turns into a coach. The theory here is just that if you start to alter the mindset, you can alter what you're doing. If you alter what you're doing, you're going to alter the outcome. If you alter the outcome, you're going to move towards the things that you want. The creator role is that's what's shifted from the victim. So that's all about taking baby steps towards the things that you want to get. So you have to first identify, okay, what is this thing I want? And you can take this to an extreme. I mean, say you have a domestic violence victim, and this person is, being abused in whatever way, screamed at, held back, held in a room, hit, physical violence, whatever it is. That person first has to say, okay, what is it I want? How do I get out of this situation, presumably? And you identify the place you want to go, as opposed to just dwelling on, as a victim, this is awful, this is awful, this is awful, because that doesn't change anything. So you first identify, where do you want to go? And then you start trying to map out, how do you get there? In other words, you just start taking steps towards that thing. And they can be baby steps, and usually they have to be, especially if somebody's really enmeshed in this drama triangle. And it can require help. The coach is where that kind of rescuer role translates into. And the coach can be very important, especially when you have situations like domestic violence, where sometimes people feel so battered down that they feel like they have no worth. They don't feel like they're capable of putting this together. It can be really important to have somebody come in as a coach, and instead of just being this white knight that the rescuer is, you come in and say, okay, I might need to give you some help. I might need to give you a hand here somewhere, but I also need to end you in a position where you're able to do things on your own. I need to figure out how to give you the power. I need to figure out how to make you make these decisions. You make the calls, you figure out where you want to go. And so again, this is just an orientation shift. It's looking at the problem differently, rather than just coming in and saying, you're right, that persecutor is an asshole. Like, how do we get back at him? You say, okay, you're in this domestic violence situation, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be DV. I keep using that example. And you come in and you say, okay, how do we get you out of there? How do we get you up on your feet? How do we get you a job and, independence and all these things, and kind of work through that with someone. And you don't get emotionally wrapped up into it in the same degree, because a lot of times with rescuers, you want to come in and you own it. Like when I was an attorney early on, very often I would embody the case for my clients, and it wrecked me. I remember I have a vivid memory of coming home one day, and I felt like I was going through 10 divorces at once. And I went in the bathroom and I just curled up in a ball and I started crying. Because I was just soaking it up, as opposed to just coming in and saying, okay, look, here's your options. Here's how we fix your problems. What do you want? How do we get you there? Instead, I was just like, this is awful. You're right. I can't believe he or she is doing this stuff to you. And then I was a neurotic mess. So coach kind of has to disconnect a little bit. You don't get totally wrapped up. I mean, you don't have to say, I don't give a crap about you. Otherwise you wouldn't be helping in the first place, but you do have to create some healthy boundaries, I think, in order to be that coach. The last role on here is the shift from persecutor into challenger. So under the TED model, you remember that the persecutor kind of comes from a place of anger. So if you see something that you feel is an injustice or needs to be fixed, or that you need to create guidance to, rather than lashing out, you sort of catch yourself and you figure out, okay, how do I turn this into something more constructive? And we've got innumerable examples in history of people that saw something they perceived as an injustice. The book, The Power of TED, specifically talks about Gandhi. Gandhi approached something not from, I'm going to lash out and hurt people, but it was, okay, here's the thing I want, and how do I engage in nonviolent resistance to kind of get to that goal. So that's kind of the key thing with the challenger, is basically taking something you don't like, instead of reacting just out of a sheer place of anger or getting defensive, or something like that, or getting angry rather, than you redirect that into a solution to that thing. One of the ways you can kind of check this, according to The Power of TED, is you look at your intentions. Why are you doing the thing you're doing? A lot of people kind of cover it with these explanations of, well, I'm trying to teach somebody a lesson, or I want to create boundaries. And a good check on this is, if you're interacting with the other person are they getting super defensive at you, which probably means they feel like they're being attacked, which probably means you're doing something that can be offensive, which might mean that you're coming out as a little more persecutor than challenger. This is a quote from Lily Tomlin I really like. "Forgiveness is giving up the hope of ever having a better past." And part of the reason I like that is because especially in the family law context, I see this all the time, where these drama triangle situations just go on and on and on and on in perpetuity. A lot of times you'll see people just locked onto the thing that happened. And sometimes it's like, this happened 5 years ago and I'm still going to keep yelling at you about it, which if you go back to the drama triangle model, makes perfect sense, because you're always just trying to play this game that's not getting anywhere, right? But if you're kind of looking at it from like a TED model and you're fixating on the solution is going somewhere else rather than continually being angry about this thing that's in the past. So I think that's a big part of this whole model, is rather than like redirecting yourself from what you're pissed off about, in essence, from that stuff that happened, into some stuff that you can look forward to continue to get yourself to where you want to be. Just some kind of basic guide points on this, as essentially a recap here. You try to, when you recognize what you're doing, when you're in the game, or if other people are in the game around you, once you start seeing the basic pattern, the things to kind of hunt for, or avoiding yourself getting into victimhood, or you realizing you're just sitting there whining. Are you saying like, oh my God, I hate this, it's so stupid, as opposed to, I don't like this situation, how do I fix it? Okay, I'm going to start doing those things. Getting caught up in blame is a great trigger, because if you suddenly realize you're constantly saying it's his fault, it's her fault, it's whatever, the politicians, or whatever you want to do, that's classic drama triangle stuff. Solve the problem is a huge one. This was another one I had a wristband on for quite a while. I still got it at home, and it just says just solve the problem. Because very often I think it's so easy to just get caught up in 2020. God, we've seen so much of this, like the finger pointing and I'm angry about XYZ, as opposed to just fix whatever you're upset about. Don't just sit there and whine about it, solve it. If you kind of take action towards something, even if you're not ultimately solving the problem right now, you are so much further along in, even if you're trying to figure out what doesn't work, like you taking some action just makes you feel better, and it starts you on this path towards actually fixing stuff. You can certainly get help, just make sure that you're seeking it with empowerment. If you're trying to help someone else, just make sure that you're trying to do it with an eye towards empowering them. If you are angry, you're kind of coming from this persecutor place, make sure that you're using strategy to solve the issue. Again, kind of solve the problem, not just make it worse. And that's kind of it. That's the very abbreviated version of this presentation. A couple other things, if you guys are interested in this, there's a few really good books. Power of TED I mentioned. It's a very easy read. It's actually written like a novel, so I'd highly recommend it. It's by David Emerald. It's also on Audible. There is also A Game-Free Life by Stephen Karpman, which is kind of academic. It's a more difficult read. And then I've thrown my things in there. My Reality Generator is that journal I was talking about earlier. I really have used that as a way of kind of redirecting some of that blamey stuff, because I think it's so easy to get caught up in that. So many of the exercises I have are built around how do I avoid blame, and how do I kind of refocus on either gratitude or problem solving. And then the last thing I have on there is my book, The Emotional Embuffination, which it doesn't talk about the drama triangle per se. However, it does deal a lot with kind of victimhood and kind of shifting into problem solving. So the same basic things we were talking about. And that is it. That's all I have on the short version. So any questions about any of that, or does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I've noticed that there are certain friendships I've had where there was a lot of drama going on all the time.
Yeah.
And as I got healthier and stopped playing games, that those people weren't interested in hanging out with me anymore.
Absolutely. That's a great comment. And I've had that exact same experience. This is something, so you always hear people talking, I know I've had this theme for a while. You always hear people talking about how you need to cut toxic people out of your life. And if you look at this from a drama triangle model, part of the problem is you're always unconsciously running around looking for people to play this game with you. And so you'll remember, you're baiting people. You sort of like offer things, just like that girl would say, "Oh, I'm so fat." Like she's prompting people to come in and play this game. And people that are in drama do the same thing. So if, for example, somebody comes in and goes, "Oh my God, it's like I can't believe this thing happened to me," and then somebody else comes in and says, "You're right, that's so terrible," you're going to get a very different reaction than if you're like, "Oh, that sucks." You know, the way that you're interacting with people that are baiting you into this game is going to alter, because they're constantly looking for people to play with them. And so if you're not feeding into, "You're right, that's so terrible, those people wronged you," then they're going to just shift on to somebody else who's more interested in playing that same game because they want the players. And so I think when you start to like change the way that you're dealing with your conflict in your life, you will start to change who's in your circle just intrinsically. Like people will just sort of drift out if they're just still stuck in that drama mode. That's my theory. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
It's and there are certain relatives who want to box you into a certain role, right? And
Absolutely.
and they get really frustrated when you won't play along.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I can think of going to my family's house, and their favorite pastime is talking about other people.
Oh no.
And it's like, "So how's that person doing? Oh, I heard that this and this." And we just nod our heads and not engage in the discussion. It's just not healthy.
Which goes right back to that finger pointing thing. It's like, I don't like something, so let's like find somebody to blame for it. Which in a sense, I think is kind of problem solving, because at our core, I think we're trying to say, okay, I don't like the situation, so let's look for the causal so I can change it. The problem is it's so easy to get wrapped up into that cycle that's all that ever happens. You just start constantly finger pointing. And again, oh my gosh, I go right now on Facebook amidst the political climate we're in, and how many people are just running on Facebook and ranting for hours on end about whatever they believe. And these same people are not doing anything. They're just ranting. Like they're not trying to actively solve problems. They're not going out and doing something. They're just ranting. I think that's kind of the same basic issue here. Is it's like, I just want to finger point to that person as the persecutor. But they don't want to actually fix the issue, at least not on any conscious level. But anyway, that's not that I'm trying to turn this into a political discussion or anything. I'm not playing any particular sides. I'm just saying that behavior pattern, I think, is very similar to stuff you see in other contexts. So
I think it's interesting, this Lily Tomlin quote.
Yes.
Forgiveness is giving up the hope of ever having a better past. It's a funny thing as I'm writing about my past, that as I delve into things deeper, I see more and more of the positive influences that were around me as I went through some really dark times.
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, I mostly remember the things that hurt. But then as I go back into the time period and really think about the other people who were around me, there were some really great people. Mm-hmm. And I think one reason why a person from such a totally messed up family can survive is because, I had some really great school teachers or music teachers or
role models.
Yeah. There were some really great neighbors. So that I think that in a way I'm finding out the gifts that I had in the past, as well as the troubles, But that isn't really about the drama triangle.
But I think it kind of is, though, because if you're in this so you're in the midst of the problems and you're wrapped up in the game, right? You're just, everything's drama. Remember, the drama triangle is about focus. It's about the orientation, the mindset that you're approaching the problems with. And so you can have people all around you, because these people are all around you all the time. There's people that have kind of stable, positive influences that could be coming in trying to coach you. And if you're just not there yet, you're not in a place where you can kind of embrace that, your focus becomes on the negative stuff, and you can be missing that. Because if you're in that drama game, you just start pointing at the bad stuff, the people that hurt you, your own helplessness, the fact that you're stuck in the situation you don't like, and you're not paying attention to those. In the same sense that, like, when you said, or we were talking about how the people will start drifting away when you start changing, because they're not paying attention to you if you're not immersed in that same game. And so you might not have been paying attention, even if they were legit helping you or creating positive influences or kind of subtly pushing you in the right direction. Your focus wasn't there at that time. And so now when you're looking back at it, you're starting to see them all of a sudden, and they were there and present and might have, nudged you in the right path or something like that. And then you can kind of be grateful for that. And that goes to that kind of orientation shift, I think, because again, this is all about mindset. This is all about how do you approach the problems you're dealing with. And so if you are looking back and saying, oh, that thing, and this, I think, is something that people get really, really hung up on. I see people all the time who are decades after an event has happened are still upset about it. Like, my divorce was 30 years ago and I'm still really pissed at my ex because of blah, blah, blah. And they spend hours and hours ranting about it to their kids. And they're like, get over it. Like, why are you so worried about that? And I think that goes back to that quote, is again, it's sort of a focal point, because in your present now, you are where you are. Your past is what it is. You're not going to change the past. And so if you're still wrapped up in, I wish the past was a different thing, rather than just accepting it is what it is, and it had its formative power on you, and it made your mess and gave you your message. If that's where you're stuck, is not being able to accept that, then you're still immersed in that drama triangle.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about the psychology, the tricks, tools that you can use, and a ton more depth about how to deal with conflict, how to eliminate drama from your life, check this out. It's Emotional Embuffination, the book. You can learn more by going to www.embuffination.com.